And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, curbing China. The U.S. is getting ready to limit Chinese tech investments. Why the White House believes U.S. national security is at risk. Plus, Uber's London Lifeline. The fate of the ride-hailing giant's London operation rests in a judge's hands, but it may have won a key regulator over to its side. And our exclusive interview with Morningside founder Richard Liu, one of the earliest investors and largest stakeholders in Xiaomi, how the company is gearing up for the tech giant's $6.1 billion public offering. But first to our top story. Bloomberg has learned that the U.S. Treasury Department is planning to toughen its stance to protect U.S. intellectual property against China in a move that could heighten an already heated trade dispute. Under the new plan, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin would move to limit Chinese tech investments in the U.S. under the guise of national security concerns. China's Ministry of Commerce didn't respond to Bloomberg's inquiry about this report, but Secretary Mnuchin took to Twitter to dispute it, saying on behalf of Donald Trump, the stories on investment restrictions in Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal are false, fake news. The leaker either doesn't exist or know the subject very well. Statement will be out, not specific to China, but to all countries that are trying to steal our technology. Joining us now from New York to discuss, Isaac Stone-Fish, a senior fellow at the Asia Society, and with me in studio, Bloomberg Tech senior executive editor Brad Stone. Isaac, I want to start with you. Reading between the lines or the tweets, what's your read on this?
It does seem like there is a there. Mnuchin seems like he got caught off guard by that Sunday Wall Street Journal story that talked a lot about this, and it does seem to reflect in a way a fight within the administration between trade hawks like Navarro and Mnuchin, who wants to have a more balanced strategy towards China.
We're seeing, Brad, U.S. stocks getting dragged down with this. What's the impact on U.S. tech companies?
I mean, there's a lot of fear out there. You look today, NVIDIA down 5%, Micron down 6%, Intel 3.5%. China is the biggest tech market in the world, right? And they haven't had a lot of success in some sectors like semiconductors. You limit the ability of the U.S. tech companies to go and sell into China, and then suddenly you're putting a lot of pressure on China to go and compete. It's also, we all know this is a very global supply chain. A chip gets made in the U.S., it goes to China, gets completed, it gets put on a smartphone, it comes back here. There's a worry that there's not a lot of nuance in this policy, and it ends up hurting a lot of these companies that are very globalized.
Now, Isaac, there's already been an impact on Chinese investment in U.S. tech companies. What has been the impact so far, given the last several months of this sort of tit-for-tat back and forth, and what could the impact of this now be?
So we've seen, in terms of Chinese investment in general, a roughly 90% drop from the first 5 months of this year compared to last year. That's a huge difference in 2018 versus 2017. And while tech companies haven't been the hardest hit, they've certainly faced a lot more difficulty both in getting a comfortable reception in Silicon Valley and in Beijing as well. And in terms of this latest policy, I think what was really interesting was that on Thursday, Chinese Chairman Xi Jinping met with a group of business executives and said, hey, in the West, you guys have this tradition of turning the other cheek. But in China, in my culture, we punch back. And that was before the news broke on Sunday about this even tougher reception that Chinese firms can expect to face, Chinese tech firms especially can expect to face in the United States. So I think this is going to get worse.
And Isaac, you were just on the show a few days ago talking about Google's big investment in JD.com, the big Chinese e-commerce company. Are we not going to see more deals like that?
Now that, I don't want to say that's the end of an era, but I will say that was probably the last bright spot that we might see for weeks, months, or even the rest of 2018 in terms of U.S. and China tech companies cooperating.
How is, Brad, U.S. tech reacting?
They're trying to do everything they can to make an impact on this policy. So the New York Times recently reported that Tim Cook last month was in the Oval Office asking for a more nuanced approach. You've got all the U.S. trade associations going in there and lobbying for changes to this policy. You know, I think they're doing what they can.
Is the U.S. administration going to listen? I mean, is Trump open to this?
We'll see. You know, they haven't I don't think, we've seen a lot of economic actions couched in national security terms, and I don't think they've shown a lot of flexibility so far.
Isaac, do you get the sense that the president is actually concerned about a trade deficit, or is he concerned about national security? Or playing to his base?
I think he started this out of concern for a trade deficit. He complained in the 80s a lot about the trade deficit with Japan. It's one of his policies he's been surprisingly consistent on for decades. I think a lot of people around Trump have a real fear that Chinese investment brings national security concerns, especially with companies like Huawei and ZTE, major telecommunications companies. And I think the people in the administration are getting Trump to diversify, so to speak, away from just focusing on a trade deficit and focusing on national security implications.
Now, there are many who say this is not a trade war yet. This is just a dispute. Certainly there may be more levers to pull. How many more levers are there before we do escalate to code red or whatever you want to call it?
I think both sides have a lot of different tools that they can use for this. The two economies are so deeply integrated. And China, for example, there's a lot of major American brands that really see China as their future. I wrote a piece a few months ago about Starbucks and Starbucks' great presence in China and the fear and the possibility that Chinese consumers, perhaps from urging from the government, decide to boycott Starbucks, for example. So there's a lot that Beijing can do to make it more difficult for American companies to flourish in China. And when that happens, and if you have, say, China really pushing against some tech CEOs like we saw with Apple, they are going to go to the White House and they're going to lobby, and they're going to lobby on Beijing's behalf to a degree because they want tensions to subside.
All right. Isaac Stonefish of the Asia Society, Bloomberg's Brad Stone. Thank you both. Of course, we're going to continue to follow. Well, Elon Musk has just days to make good on his pledge to pump out 5,000 Tesla Model 3 sedans a week by the end of this month. How is the Tesla CEO planning to accomplish this? A giant tent the size of 2 football fields. Inside the canopy is in a 3-ring circus, but an assembly line to put together to create Model 3s. Musk has called the tent, quote, pretty sweet. His critics aren't impressed. Coming up, Uber gets a new regulatory win as its London trial begins. What this means for the fate of its tens of thousands of drivers in the UK next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Uber's long-term desire to keep operating in London may have just gotten a boost from London Transit Authorities. Uber's recent moves to protect passengers and drivers has appeared to appease Transport for London, reducing one of the biggest hurdles to its operations there. The new stance coincides with the start of a highly anticipated hearing in London over TfL's September 2017 refusal to extend Uber's permit to operate in the UK capital. For more on this, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde in London, and with me here in the studio, we have Bloomberg Tech's Eric Newcomer, who, of course, covers Uber. Caroline, walk us through what happened at the hearing today. It is going to go on for several more days.
You're right, at least a couple of days. It kicked off at about 10 a.m. London time, and it's over in the Magistrates Court of Westminster Magistrates Court it's called. Apparently it's packed with reporters and indeed, of course, the key lawyers involved. That's Thomas de la Mare as the QC representing Uber. You've also got a lawyer representing Transport for London, all being heard in front of a female judge. And notably also there is Tom Elvidge. He is currently the UK manager for Uber. He was there being cross-examined, and really there was plenty of mea culpa coming from Uber. I think what shocked the press the most, certainly here in London, was that they said actually the decision that TfL, Transport for London, took back in September of last year was the right one. They were not, in any way, they felt, perhaps they weren't fit and proper to be in ownership of a license to run here in the capital.
Eric, what are some of the measures that Uber has done to appease the regulator?
A lot of different things. So they put some independent directors on their UK board. They restricted sort of how long drivers can work in London, some sort of cross-border issues, making sure drivers are working in the right country. They've shared some data with the city. So it's sort of a slate of reforms to try to make them more appealing to regulators there.
And, we've been hearing from drivers, Caroline, and, many of them seem to have some goodwill towards Uber that you might not expect.
Yeah, hundreds of pounds have been spent by Bloomberg in an effort to do this sort of journalist reporting for you. And this is basically getting into plenty of Ubers and asking the drivers how they feel about this. And yes, some of them feel that commissions are a bit too high and perhaps they could have an easier way of processing incidents that occur. But notably, there's real goodwill coming from the drivers overall. Generally, they feel that, look, they're supportive of this company. They love the flexibility that it offers it. And this is what you hear from plenty of the drivers or delivery people working for so-called gig economy companies working here in London, such as Deliveroo, such as Uber. As they say, we get paid decently, we get flexibility, I can spend more time with my family, and I'm rewarded in such a way. I don't want to go back to my old job that was perhaps working for a minicab company. I don't want to go back to being a long-distance lorry driver. I like what I'm offered here, but perhaps I could be offered perhaps a few more safety measures, and that's actually what they're being offered. They're getting insurance, for example, packages that they can now tap into coming from Uber.
So, Eric, Uber is now asking for an 18-month license as opposed to a 5-year license to operate, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to be going through this potentially in another year and a half.
I mean, I think, they're willing to sort of make baby steps here. I think there's a lot of confidence at Uber that under CEO Dara Khosrowshahi, they're showing a new face, they're making real changes, and that in 18 months they're only going to look better than they do now. And they're trying to say, yes, we had problems before we admit it. We've brought in new leadership and we're changing. So I think there's a lot of optimism that if they're allowed to go forward here, they're only going to look better sort of in the future.
Caroline, whatever happens here doesn't just affect Uber, but other ride-hailers as well, correct?
Correct, because interestingly, at about a similar time last year, not only had Uber just had its license revoked, but then a new company that was trying to enter the market, the likes of Taxify, which is now backed by Germany's Daimler, they were looking to enter the London, and they also didn't get their license allowed. It was taken away after a day of operation. And so Taxify is one of those companies that is waiting in the wings, looking to see how this unfolds, and basically when there's a more receptive capital city, they will try and enter as well. I think also what's also to look out for is any competitors that could win out if, for example, Uber does struggle to once again win over TfL. That seems unlikely as it stands. It looks like they've done enough to woo the regulator. But there is one particular company called Via Van, which is a US startup, and it's got the backing once again of a company, Daimler, Germany's giant, which runs Mercedes. Its vans is a teaming up, a joint venture, and it just entered the market in April. And actually some of the drivers that Bloomberg spoke to have said, look, if things don't look too good for Uber going forward, we might just start to look at this particular new entrant and this competition a little bit more pleasantly, and maybe it could do pretty well.
So, Eric, what's next as we watch this hearing play out?
Well, there would be a ruling, and I think the ruling is sort of what we're all waiting for. If Uber loses, they can still appeal, they can still continue to operate. So this is like it's sort of many in the legal. This is an ongoing situation. Uber's not about to be off the road anytime soon. But if they win, it would be a major victory and sort of put them back on the path of the good with the city of London.
A big victory for the new CEO.
Right.
All right, Eric Newcomer, who covers Uber for us, Caroline Hyde in London. Thank you both. Sticking with ride-hailing, one of Uber's main rivals, Didi Chuxing, is making a push into the Australian market, just launching operations there. Bloomberg's Paul Allen filed this report from Sydney.
It's a slow and steady start for the launch of ride-sharing service Didi Chuxing here in Australia. The company's been trialling its service in the small city of Geelong ahead of its launch in Melbourne today. But here in Sydney and the rest of Australia, well, we're going to have to wait. The Australia and New Zealand boss Dylan Yee says Didi will take a pragmatic step-by-step approach to expansion, with feedback from the Melbourne launch used to shape offerings and launches elsewhere in the country. Didi's been raising capital to fund its expansion. A $4 billion funding round in December raised its valuation to $56 billion, with sources saying the company has cash on hand of $12 billion. Discounts of up to 50% are going to be offered to riders until the end of July. Well, drivers who sign up early will qualify for incentives as well. The ride-sharing market in Australia is getting a little bit crowded, though. We already have Uber here, and Didi's going to be joining Taxify and Ola as well on the streets down under. Paul Allen, Bloomberg News, Sydney.
Coming up, can Xiaomi's decision to go public live up to the hype? We'll look at the impact of its decision to postpone the China half of its stock debut next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. The Chinese smartphone maker Xiaomi is on its way to a potential $6 billion plus public listing, marking what would be the biggest IPO in 2 years. But it may have hit a snag in its hopes to reach a $100 billion valuation by postponing the mainland China half of its listing. Bloomberg's chief North Asia correspondent Stephen Engel reports from Beijing.
Xiaomi's decision to postpone a simultaneous listing in Shanghai with its Hong Kong IPO could hurt China's ambitions to lure its larger tech companies to list at home via China Depository Receipts, or CDRs. The Hong Kong IPO is set to be the world's biggest in nearly 2 years, to raise about $6.1 billion, but it's a considerably shaved down offering that originally was expected to top $10 billion. And the company's CFO says there's no time frame to revive the domestic part of the listing. Sources say Xiaomi scrapped the CDR offering because of differences with the regulator over valuation, but Xiaomi says it had no dispute with the CSRC. Now, investors, though, may dispute Xiaomi's valuation. The IPO is said to be marketed at up to 29.3 times forecasted 2019 earnings, making it more than twice as expensive as Apple and even a little bit pricier than Tencent, China's biggest internet company. Now, Xiaomi says it deserves a premium in valuation because it sees itself as an emerging internet and e-commerce company rather than simply a lower margin smartphone player. The IPO likely begins trading in Hong Kong July 9th. Stephen Engel, Bloomberg News, Beijing.
And we continue our look at Xiaomi's IPO as part of our Venture China series. Qiming Venture Partners founding partner Dwayne Kwong told Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie why he hopes the world's largest IPO in more than 2 years will pave the way for more mega deals in the region.
Hong Kong has just started this new listing rule structure, and Xiaomi being the first one to file under that listing rule, I certainly hope that the IPO will be successful, paving the way for many more Chinese innovative tech companies to go to Hong Kong as yet another interesting exit venue.
What are your views on the changes around domestic listings, the moves here in China to encourage more of these tech companies in particular to list in the domestic markets via the CDR plan?
I think the CDR rules are interesting because historically, many of the bigger, successful Chinese tech companies have chosen offshore markets for listing. So the fundamental change in China has to be listing requirements that enable similar companies of the future BATs, to be able to list in China. So I think a lot of people focus primarily on the CDR element of it. But I think that's just one small portion. The key is the new change to encourage the unicorns to list here a lot sooner, a lot faster.
About Tencent and Alibaba and just the significance of their role as investors in the tech space. Are they proving detrimental in terms of their clout? Are they proving suffocating for some of these startups? Does it make your job more difficult?
It has sometimes made our job more difficult. But on the other hand, they also an interesting avenue of exit. They bought out both companies as well as stakes from early investors such as Qiming. So in that regard, it certainly added more exit possibilities. But in terms of the overall competitive and entrepreneurial environment, I think a more subdued strategic investment environment, it's probably healthier.
Does that intense competition between Tencent and Alibaba, does that just continue to grind on?
I think it's going to grind on for a little longer. Both companies have strong ability to not only do extremely well in their core business, they have the network effect either on the WeChat side or on the Taobao e-commerce side, and then now glued by payment. With that type of effect, they could actually get into a lot of new business and continue to be successful. I think it's probably not too early, at least for the government, to start thinking about regulations and how to while encourage the growth of the home champion, but also be mindful of their effect on the overall startup environment. It hasn't been detrimental yet, but if untamed and unchecked, this could be dangerous years to come.
That was Qiming Venture Partners founding partner Dwayne Kwong speaking with Bloomberg's own Tom McKenzie. Coming up, we sit down with the CEO of Africa's biggest company by market value. Naspers CEO will join us to talk about investing in Tencent and more. That is next. And we take a look into Walmart's exclusive members-only shopping experience. Jet Black CEO joins us later in the hour. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. On Friday, Africa's biggest company by market cap reported a 72% increase in full-year earnings. Naspers credits classified advertising and its e-commerce business for the boost. The company also happens to be one of the biggest, if under-the-radar, tech investors in the world and has long relied on its 31% stake in Chinese tech giant Tencent to accelerate profits. But its investments in new online companies are starting to bear fruit. Naspers raised $9.8 billion in March by selling a 2% stake in Tencent, then netted another $1.6 billion profit from the sale of a stake in the Indian e-commerce startup Flipkart to Walmart back in May. Joining us now to discuss, Naspers CEO Bob Van Dek. Bob, fascinating story of how Naspers transformed itself from a traditional print media company 30 years ago. Curious about these recent share sales. Why did you think you needed these billions of dollars now to build the Naspers of the future?
Thanks a lot for having me, Emily. So the main reason why we freed up more capital is really driven by opportunity. So we've been focusing building our e-commerce business in classifieds and in payments and in online food delivery, and we're getting to some scale, and we realized there's so much further opportunity for us to pursue. And we really wanted to shore up the balance sheet and give us the capacity to do that. Sort of to repeat that model of finding a great business, finding a great entrepreneur, putting our backing behind him and making a great company grow.
Well, to walk away from even a small stake in Tencent is a little bit risky given how fast the company continues to grow. Where do you plan to put this money? Where do you see that opportunity?
Yeah, so what we see basically in, of course, Tencent is an amazing company, probably one of the most impressive growth stories anywhere in the world today. But what we also see is that we've managed to build excellent businesses in 120 countries in the internet, and we're just not done. And we realize that if we continue to be looking for the right entrepreneurs, we find them, we actually trust them, we give them a lot of runway, we can actually do this again and again. And a good example is what we've done with Flipkart in India, where we've also found an opportunity really early. And we backed a founder that was in 2007 in India looking at an e-commerce dream, wanting to build this great e-tail business while there were no credit cards, there was no logistics, there was no structured retail. We backed him from early on, and he's made something great happen, and that's what we do.
You bought that small stake in Tencent back in 2001. It's now worth upwards of $150 billion. You know, I'm sure there's been some fascinating drama over the years, whether to get into games or e-commerce. You've been ringside for all of this, and I'm curious if you could share a little bit more about your shared history. What's it been like to be on the front lines of Tencent's growth?
No, it's been a fantastic ride, and as I said, it's probably the company that is run by the most incredible leadership team in the world. And I think what they've done structurally well is they care about their customers. They start with their customers, they start with technology, and they've been basically taking a view on what is the best possible product we can offer. And that's very much what we do as well in our other investments. We find these entrepreneurs with a extreme product and customer focus, and we back them. I think Tencent is by far the best example of doing that, but that's fundamentally what we do in Naspers.
Your stake in Tencent is now worth more than Naspers overall, and your performance has largely mirrored Tencent's. What is your strategy to close that gap?
Yeah, no, we are, of course, a company that's quite diversified. So you would expect a certain discount to be for us normal to trade at. I think for us there are some structural other factors that make our lives a little different from others. But fundamentally, what we are focused on doing is find these great entrepreneurs that build great businesses. And actually, the last set of results are a good example where we've seen very strong growth in our e-commerce business, growing at close to 40%, accelerating year over year, and our core e-commerce investment classified turning profitable. So building great businesses, that's really what we do.
So you've said you look at listing some business units individually. Curious, which of your businesses do you think are listing ready?
Yeah, I think at this point in time, we're just looking at a broad set of options on which businesses actually can help us over time to unlock this value. And look, there's a broad set of options we have. We've done it many times in the past, right? For example, we invested in a online food delivery business called Delivery Hero. A while ago, that company went public and has been on a fantastic ride. So we actually look at it all the time. We look at which businesses would be better off if we would take them to a public situation, and we make those choices.
But can you give us any more insight on what kinds of structural changes you're considering, and when these businesses could be listed and where?
Yeah, no, it's if you look at the company where it is today, and the questions that we face, what we really want to do is take a step back, and when you make changes to the structure of your company, you want them to last, and you don't want it to be short term. And that's the process we're in at the moment. We look at a number of structural options, which could be listings, it could also be other structural changes in the portfolio. We're not at a time where we can talk about it, but we'll get back to you on that.
So Naspers is the biggest pay TV operator in Africa, but the business hasn't been doing that well, as others, including Netflix, are entering the market. Is that a business that you would consider selling? And if not, what are the plans for it?
Yeah, if you are familiar with the situation in sub-Saharan Africa, the continent's had a very tough time, right? Currencies have struggled, and as a result, our business has had a tough time as well. I think this year we actually managed to increase the profitability of our video entertainment business substantially, and it's really on the back of a turnaround program that we've been running for the last 2 years, which is really around getting a broader subscriber base and also reducing our costs. So that's working well, and we're very focused on continuing that. At the same time, even though internet penetration is considerably lower in Africa, and will take some time before everybody has access to great broadband, we do want to be ready for those changes in consumer habits. So we've launched a video-on-demand business called Showmax, which has grown tremendously on the continent. It provides great local content that people love. Around the continent, people love looking at their local soaps in their local languages. Uptake's been great, and I think we'll do a whole lot more about that.
Now, one of the strongest parts of your non-Tencent business is classifieds, people basically selling their old stuff, where you are now competing with Facebook Marketplace. Facebook obviously has the benefit of scale. They don't need to spend that much to attract new customers. How concerned are you about the threat of Facebook?
Yeah, nobody should underestimate Facebook. But what we've seen in the last few years, actually, if I take a step back to about two and a half years ago, we had this amazing entrepreneur called Alex Oxenford, who we knew from before. We invested in his company before, who came to me and he said, Bob, I can build a business in the US to be the most vibrant trading place for used goods. And since we knew he'd done it before, we listened carefully, and we backed him. And actually, if you look what happened in the last year, Letgo, that's the company involved, it was the second fastest growing app in the United States in any category. They have now approximately 100 million installs. They have been selling 400 million items in the United States, and that's just after 2 years. So they're clearly on an amazing path to change the way that Americans trade their secondhand goods, and I think it's an amazing story.
So obviously you're still figuring out what to do with all that cash, but you've had major success in China and in India. What regions or sectors in particular are you most intrigued by?
We are very excited about India as an investment sector. Now, you know that at this point in time already, based on mobile internet, India is the second largest internet market in the world, just after China. And if you look at the further potential of smartphone growth in India, we think that the online population could still double, and at some stage could catch up to the same unparalleled levels where China is today. And that amazing growth of addressable market is what really excites us about India. And what we've also noticed that Indian entrepreneurs are tenacious, and they have great ideas and aspirations. I think in Flipkart we found a great example. We've also seen other great businesses there. For example, we invested in a online food delivery business called Swiggy, which again is seeing that explosive growth driven by a large market, a big universal need that this business is addressing, and a great entrepreneur that runs with it.
Do you think you can ever top the success of Tencent?
So it's a great question. I think if you look at the history of internet investing, I don't think there is another company that delivered a similar return as that investment. So if that's the benchmark, I think everybody's failed so far. But I think the model of finding a sort of an exceptional group of people that have a real vision to build an amazing business, that's what we do all the time. And I think there is where you're going to see more of us.
And going forward, how do you expect to continue to advise Tencent? What would you like to see them do and not do when it comes to expanding into new markets?
So if you look at the position that Tencent has in the market, I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about what they've been doing. Right? As I mentioned before, what I fundamentally like is how customer and product focused they are. And if you take that approach where you have an obsession with doing the right thing, you take the largest internet market in the world, and with their starting position and their ambition, but also their willingness to invest in other internet companies, right? So they have this amazing ecosystem of companies they support with their Weixin model, and that actually have very large businesses in their own right. I think there's where we get really excited for the future.
All right, Naspers CEO Bob Endick joining us from London. Bob, thank you so much for stopping by. Well, Apple could be tweaking its audio device strategy in 2019. Bloomberg has learned higher-end AirPods, a new HomePod, and studio-quality over-the-ear headphones could debut as soon as next year. In the process, Apple is expanding its partnership with Foxconn and shifting away from smaller hardware makers such as Inventec. Coming up, we talk the future of retail and Walmart's push into personal shopping, how the world's largest retailer continues to compete with tech giant Amazon next. This is Bloomberg. Walmart wants to be your personal shopper, if you're lucky enough to be invited. Just last month, the world's biggest retailer unveiled Jet Black, a concierge shopping service for busy urban families. For $50 a month, members can text their requests to receive same-day delivery from Walmart, Jet, and other retailers like Saks and Sephora, with gift wrapping included. Jet Black is the first business to emerge from Walmart's store number 8 tech incubator. Joining us now from New York, Jenny Fleiss, CEO of Jet Black, who also co-founded Rent the Runway before joining Walmart last year to develop personalized shopping services. Jenny, thank you so much for joining us. So talk to me about how this works and what the goals are.
Sure. So Jet Black is a personal shopping service over text message. You text us whatever you want, whether it is laundry detergent, a gift for a child's birthday, or designer shoes, and we get it to you. We will send you 3 recommendations of the products that we think are the best fit, and then we send it in a courier-style delivery. It's hassle-free return should you want to return everything. We're trying to take away all of the work from e-commerce shopping.
And it's not just Walmart and Jet.com products that you'll buy for people. You might want to order something from Pottery Barn and you'll fulfill that too. But are you going to first fulfill the Walmart and Jet orders to drive traffic to your own companies?
Well, the goal of Jet Black is to give customers the best fit product recommendations for whatever their request is. So we will truly serve up whatever that store and that vendor is the best fit recommendation. So that may be that it's a Walmart product, a Jet product, a Hay Needle product, but it could be a product from Saks or Sephora. And we really want to find what's the best match for a customer so that we can build that trusted relationship with them. Of course, we're trying to get smarter so that Walmart can understand brands and products that they might not carry, but that a consumer might need and want as well. And so maybe over time they add those products to their inventory as well.
So how many people are using it so far, and what are they buying? How are they using it?
Well, we're in New York City right now for our customers, and we are invite only. We are scaling our business following our launch just 3 weeks ago, and we're constantly trying to uphold a really premium experience while also growing the business. So it's striking that balance, but we want to be best in class to give you that seamless experience that lets you save time when you're shopping.
How quickly do you plan to expand this beyond New York?
We're moving very quickly. So this is the second business that I've started, and we are already growing a large team here in New York. We're going to start looking at other cities as well. Our wait list has already given us some indications of other areas throughout the country that have excitement for this service. And it'll be interesting to see, we launched in New York City, an urban center, but what does the experience and use case look like for suburban areas who might not have the same access to some of this wide selection of products that folks in New York do? So we'll be experimenting with a few different markets. We're also continuing to tweak and find product market fit around the best pricing, the best delivery speeds, packaging. This is a very much a startup type experience within the world's largest retailer of Walmart. So it's great to see that they're being so entrepreneurial about it.
So walk me through the price point. Do you think $50 a month is sustainable? I mean, I know it's not quite the same as Amazon Prime, which breaks down to $12.99 or so a month, and this is very different, but still you're offering or aiming to offer something that is very high touch.
Absolutely. So we will continue to find product market fit. Our current pricing is $50 a month. And if you think about it, for this consumer, that's a couple hours of babysitting. Our customer typically does have young children at home. And for them, the greatest luxury is time saving. And we are saving them time in 2 major ways. The first is in finding the right fit product. So currently a customer, let's say they're shopping for a travel stroller. They might spend hours reading through reviews, Q&As, to research and find the best product to suit them. So we take away that research from them and actually arm them with the best product fit. Then we also save you time in this mental list where you're trying to remember you need to buy more paper towels, you need a birthday gift for a party that weekend. This mental clutter that can take away from the day-to-day and just being present in your life. So for this customer, that $50 a month in time savings, let alone the free shipping, it's usually same or next day shipping for most items. We do free gift wrap, handwritten gift notes. The returns are hassle-free where we take care care of everything, it very quickly can justify the $50 a month price point, if not more.
All right. Jenny Fleiss, CEO of Jet Black. We will keep our eyes on you guys.
Thank you.
Well, Instagram is now estimated to be worth more than $100 billion. That means the Facebook-owned photo-sharing company, which reached 1 billion monthly active users this month, will see its revenue move past $10 billion over the next 12 months. Instagram could also account for 16% of Facebook's revenue over the next year. That would be up from 11% in 2017. Coming up all week, we have special coverage highlighting what may be the golden age for Chinese venture capital. Our interview with one of the biggest players in the space, Richard Liu of Morningside, is next. This is Bloomberg. One of the earliest investors and largest stakeholders in Xiaomi is set for a windfall in the tech giant's $6.1 billion public offering. As part of Bloomberg's Venture China series, Morningside founder Richard Liu sat down to tell us what drove his decision to invest in the company so early. Take a listen.
We involved in this company in very early days. Basically, when we did make the decision to invest in that company, basically that's the only idea, and the people. It's nothing. A lot of the institutional investor or the late stage investor or the secondary market, they make the judgment through the number. So as the VC, we can have another view, is that to observe how the end user react to the innovation the company delivered to them. Those fans, they don't know this company background. They have no idea that there's great entrepreneur, not just today is well known, they just know this is maybe the small studio. They really screaming about, they crazy about the product. They really loyal to the product. So that's why they take a huge risk, cost their 4,000 RMB to install their OS. So that means my reading is that we already got market share from the competitor, even without selling any hardware. When the company decided to raise the funding and the valuation is 1 billion, although they have zero revenue, we feel they can give enormous, the return in the future. Although it looks like it's very expensive, but it's really cheap.
How much money did you invest altogether in Xiaomi? $2
millions we put in. We no more than the 100 million. So that's something the investment range, you can got some sense.
So one of the most successful technology companies in China, and you're a major shareholder at less than $100 million.
I'm sure, I think this investment in terms of the return multiple is great, it's fantastic. We are very happy about that. But as the VC, always the challenge is that it's not the history, but what will be the next, And
what's another one? What's one that perhaps no one's heard of yet, but will hear about in the next 5 years?
We recently invested in another, the EV company called Xiaopeng Auto. And we believe that, AI and the EV is highly related. So that's why we invest in Xiaopeng Auto. We also invest in a company called Horizon Robotics. So they want to build up, the chipset as the infrastructure to enable all the smart devices. And one of the biggest smart devices is the car. So basically, we invest in both these two companies. We think they are very impressive. They made great progress right now, but still in a very early stage.
Some of the VCs that we've spoken to have a minimum hit rate. They look at the number of startups they invest in. They have a minimum number that need to IPO or grow their valuation by a certain amount. Do you have any kind of minimum bar when it comes to your investments? Any mark for success, a KPI?
Sometimes we say venture investment is kind of the arts. You can set up whatever you feel comfortable and what you expect the KPI, but it never works in what you can do, because what we invest is uncertainty. We have the principle, we have the methodologies, we have our strategy, we have our planning, but we don't have the KPI. It's very dangerous.
Are you worried at all by the potential impacts of trade sanctions and a trade war between China and America on the tech companies you invest in?
In the long run, I don't worry too much, but in short term, we definitely worry about how people will really specifically impact each subsectors. United States have the best education, higher education system in this world. And we have the working very hard entrepreneurs. We have the great engineer, talented people in this world. They can work together, they can address the business opportunity both in the United States and China. I'm concerned that the people flow will be cut. American people are so intelligent, so smart. They can make the right and the wise and the intelligent choice. I believe that. I have confidence about the American people.
That was Richard Liu, founding partner at Morningside. Well, Meituan revealed huge losses in addition to strong growth when it filed for a Hong Kong IPO. Bloomberg has learned the company is looking to raise $6 billion in funds to better compete in areas like ride-hailing, finance, travel. The company follows smartphone maker Xiaomi, that's also targeting a Hong Kong IPO. Some say Meituan's debut is another signal of China's rising tech strength, a point of tension, of course, with the United States. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tomorrow, we're going to be hearing more about the Uber issues in London, and we'll be back. This is Bloomberg.